Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. When I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm the Director of Executive Search at Wire Partners, recruiting top talents in the consumer and retail industries. And guess who we speak with in this podcast? Indeed, with top talents, leaders, and luminaries in the consumer goods and retail industries. And we're now more than 170 episodes in. So do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and be educated with some of the industry's top voices. Remember, we're a part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by the CPG guys in the US. So do tune into their show to learn about the consumer goods industry and the other side of the pond. And also, if you haven't yet, remember to follow us on LinkedIn, where you'll join a community of 15,000 plus members. And you can also find us now on Instagram, where you'll find our latest and upcoming content. And today I'm really excited to have Ammar Basit with me, who is the Global Marketing Effectiveness Analytics Lead at one of the big players in consumer healthcare, Haleon, which is the former, you'll probably know by now, the former GSK Consumer Healthcare. Hey, Ammar, thanks for joining. How are you?
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well here in the, we were saying before, in the middle of the Barcelona summer, which is pretty much an oven right now when you go out in the streets. So I'm happy we're talking about ACs and so on. I don't have it in my room, but I do have it in the office, and it's on pretty much all day in the office.
I know, it's funny because when it really heats up, then the offices fill up as well. So there's a nice correlation between weather, hot weather and office, people go to the office more.
Yeah. Do you find that in the era of working from home?
Yeah, I think so. I think you work from home, but I guess when it's really hot, then you see either cafes filling up or offices where the air conditioning is more on. So I definitely see that for sure.
Excellent. So thanks for joining me. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that's actually quite new to me, which is marketing mix modeling. Before we go into that, could you tell us a bit? And of course, we'll leave your LinkedIn profile on the show notes. But if you could tell us a bit briefly about your career path until the current role that you have at Haleon.
Sure. So I'm an insights and analytics professional. Worked across different companies and locations. So I started as a management trainee at British American Tobacco. Worked across South Africa, Turkey, Russia as well, and the UK. And then I worked there for 6 years. And the last role there was kind of heading up the insights and strategy function for the UK. And then in parallel, I was, you always work with agencies and consultancies. So I want to be like, what is the consulting world like? So I moved over to consulting, boutique consultancy based in London. And that was my first entry into consulting, but also into the consumer health space as well.
What an easy one to make, because to leave the comfort of corporate to go into consulting, what was the thought process behind that?
Well, I think it's, what you alluded to right now, it's, me understanding the client environment, what they want. And also, I think for me, it was more about working on a variety of different projects as well. So working with different set of clients, I worked on stuff like all the way from M&A, which I never did in my life, but that was my first time, to market entry strategy for a global player, to brand positioning. So it was kind of working on the really different stuff to what I was doing at BAT. And then I worked there for about 2.5 years. I missed the corporate environment, of course. Consultancy is good, but for not that long. And I joined Reckitt in the UK. So I was working in the insights and analytics function. There, my role was quite broad. I was working more around the performance analytics, retail audit, so the traditional insights analytics role. Though that was the first time I got introduced to MMM as well, so marketing mix modeling. So we did it across a number of brands, including Dettol, Nurofen, and Durex. And that was when I really realized, MMM is something I would really like to get into, perhaps a bit more. Kind of sticking and making sure that whatever role I do, it still has the insights bit, but more so on the MMM side of things. I joined Haleon about 2.5 years ago, and this was my first global role. And in that, I mean, I look after MMM. So I think that's my career in about maybe 13, 14 years of my working life. But it's been quite varied, no complaints,
Good brands, good companies there. So always good to have those on your CV. And I think it's also interesting that you actually left the industry and then a sidestep into another industry, which I'm sure has benefited like your ways of working.
Yeah, sure. I think changing companies and changing industries has definitely helped, but also I've become more comfortable with taking risks as well. Because I still have a lot of friends who are in the same company for the last number of years, and they're having a really good time. But I think kind of broadening my experience, getting those opportunities, and taking those risks across different parts of the world has really developed me, into who I am today.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think I would never change anything when looking back.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to ask you later for career advice to your younger
Yeah.
self. So I'm sure there's a lot of learnings that you can share there. Tell me a bit about like your current role at Haleon, and actually maybe we can go right into it. And if you could explain us, like, for an ignorant soul like me, what does marketing mix modeling mean exactly?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the market mix modeling in terms of
Yeah.
what it means first. So each company may have different terminology, MMM. So it could be marketing mix modeling, or it could be media mix modeling. So in the simplest way, and I don't have a technical background, so hopefully I can be as simple as possible, but it estimates the relationship between marketing factors, so your advertising, your pricing, your promo, and sees the impact of those on your dependent variables like your sales, your share of market, brand equity measures, and so forth. But of course, it also helps you dive deeper into your sales as well. So it manages to separate your sales into, perhaps, for example, base sales. If you were to do nothing, what sales would you be generating on an annual basis, and the incremental sales generated by your marketing activities, as I alluded to before. So that's in the simplest sense of what MMM is. You can have marketing mix modeling, which analyzes a variety of different marketing activities and the impact of those. Or you could do a media mix modeling, where it just looks at the media or the advertising channels and the impact of those on your sales. I would say it uses regression modeling, so econometric regression modeling, and it's a scientific, credible methodology used industry-wide. And I think there are a lot of people who could be skeptical about it, but it's been tried and tested for many, many, many years. So
So
that's
it's really like an analytical way of really analyzing where companies spending their marketing budget or media budget and what return it's giving, no? And not only in terms of sales, but also in terms of, as you said, brand equity, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So it really depends on your model scope and what you're looking out for. But majority of companies look for how well their advertising or media is working. Is it generating a high ROI, return on investment? Is it generating higher sales? Are my campaigns working? Am I on the right platforms like Facebook, or am I using Reels correctly, or stories and static images and so forth? So there's a lot you can do with MMM, but essentially, it's what you said, pretty much.
Yeah. And how does it work at Haleon? Like, specifically, what are you doing there around them?
So my role is, as I said, it's a global role. So I am responsible for the end-to-end delivery of MMM studies across the globe. So we have we have brands, and we cover about 50% of our media budget through the MMM in terms of evaluation, which is pretty sizable amount when you think your advertising spend might be over £1 billion a year. So in Haleon, and if I go back to the GSK days, the MMMs were being done in isolation, country by country. So, you'd be using different vendors, different methodologies, perhaps, no standardization, being paying a lot for it. So a global team was set up to kind of address these elements. We sit within the insights and analytics function within marketing. So we work with two vendors, but one in the US and one non-US. And that helps us to kind of bring the standardization, allows us to use month methodology, gives us, of course, cost efficiencies as well, which is a big thing. And then, in Haleon, what we've done is we have one modeling agency, we have a global center team where I sit, and then we have an offshore team as well, which kind of looks through the data side of things as well. So it's a pretty extensive process. And I kind of handle the multi-stakeholder engagement, making sure that, the insights we get are actionable, and then working with the local teams as well to action those MMM recommendations coming out of the studies as well. But that's kind of my role in a nutshell. There's a lot of the stuff we can do as well. And I think, this year and the next few years is all about transformation. So how can we actually leverage the MMM even better to drive more insights out of it and to really change our media strategy and marketing strategy going forward?
And why do you think it's important that FMCG companies do this MMM exercise?
Well, I mean, if you think of the FMCG environments, there's a lot of scrutiny on budgets. A lot of marketers complain about losing budgets year on year. Though there has been some talk, I mean, reading online and everything, marketing budgets are increasing, but still there is that scrutiny to deliver top line, but then you have to optimize the bottom line. So that's a thing. And the media landscape is evolving. So where there's traditional TV, there's so many now digital channels as well, and each generation interacts with media very, very differently. So using an MMM, I think, is critical to any company. Firstly, it's an analytical approach. So you don't make assumptions about the media performance or the media channels you want to advertise on through gut feel. And I think I've listened to this a lot, because sometimes you would challenge your media agencies on, why do you think digital TV is performing better? And then this is just based on, gut feel or, how we see the media landscape evolving. So MMM gives you the analytical approach. It's a fact-based numbers approach, and numbers don't lie. Of course, numbers do lie if your data is incorrect, but let's assume the data is all correct. And then it also helps you to optimize your media budgets as well. So for example, if you've not seen an increase in your media budgets, or if you've seen a decrease in your media budgets, you can use the MMM to get a glance or get an idea of how could I make my media budgets work better. So should I be fixing some of my fundamentals of TV? Should I, be focusing on certain platforms on social? So it's really about that as well. It's just not about, to back up, why you should be cutting my marketing budget, but it's also to optimize your current existing marketing budgets as well. And of course, if you think of brands like Unilever, right? They have a plethora of brands and categories. And not having an MMM and would, I think, be pretty silly, because they have such high advertising budgets. But I think most importantly, what I've noticed in my last few years of working in the MMM is that MMM gives you some actionable insights as well. So it's not just numbers, but it also tells what you need to be doing. So it's great, I think. A bit biased because I work in this role, but of course.
But it's good to believe in what you do. So I think this is super interesting, because it's a part that we talk a lot about, like retail media or marketing or whatever, but not so much about like what's the compass that makes us decide where to put our money. No, I think that sometimes, as you said, we may think it's a gut feel thing, but there's actually a scientific way of evolving. Because when we think of media, like if you look 30 years ago, it was basically all press or TV. No, there were only these. But I think that with the surge of internet, there's been obviously a complete revolution. And now if you think about it, it's not only about putting an ad on the internet, but also, for example, influencers have become like a very important part of the mix. Yeah, how is the media evolving? How are all these pieces evolving from your observations?
Yeah. So I'm not a media expert, and I'll defer to the media experts for the correct answer. But I think if I look from an insights analytics perspective, and what my limited experience at MMM is, um, you would be surprised that TV is still the king in terms of being the largest contributor to incremental sales when it comes to advertising channels. Majority of companies have I think TV still forms a large part of their share of spend, and has the largest impact on generating sales. But that's not to say that the digital landscape isn't evolving. As you said, it's evolving very fast. But also, there are so many changes within certain digital channels as well. Like, for example, if you just take social, as a platform, you have Facebook, you have Snapchat, you have TikTok, and then you have different formats within those platforms as well, right? So it's evolving fast, but I think in that evolution, we should still not forget about the channels that have the highest contributor to sales, like TV, because I think there's a lot of talk, and I read a lot and speak to people, and there's a lot of radical thinking there, like maybe we should move all our send from TV to digital because our audiences are younger, and we need to tap into the younger audiences. But I also think that now our attention span has reduced quite a lot because there's so many different media touch points. So it's just more about how you bring everything together, rather than advertising or using certain channels in isolation. I think I did a project a year ago, and we were looking at baby boomers and silvers, so 60 plus and above. And that generation still finds out about new product launches through TV, which is great. So it's definitely about. I think when you think about media landscape, definitely like look at the different channels, of course, that are in the mix, but also different generations and how they use those channels as well, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that there's a thing of like trying to capture young audiences, for their lifetime value and so on. But the fact of the matter is that there's a huge chunk of the population which are boomers and silvers, as you said, right? So it's still important to at least keep those customers loyal, right? At least, which is also a way that media publicity, call it as you will, works for that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think apart from media, as a marketer, it's also essential not to forget about the fundamentals of marketing as well. So you need to make sure that the product is in store. So there are a lot of times when your product is not in stock and you're advertising on TV or other channels, which is wasted advertising efforts. Your pricing is right, for sure, and your route to market as well. So you're listed in the right channels. So you kind of touching those consumers as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you wanted to, launch a new variant of chocolate, but you were only present in maybe convenience stores, which are priced a bit higher, then you might be missing out on the younger audience. So it's a wasted effort in a way. So there are a lot of things that need to go in when you're thinking about, your media advertising.
Totally. And you mentioned that one thing that you really like about the marketing or media mix modeling is that you get actionable insights. Can you give us like some examples that you think are interesting, or maybe counterintuitive, or challenge the stereotype a bit of things that you found? I mean, I think the thing of TV is very interesting, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I'm not going to give too much away. But, there's in the last few years, I think we've been testing media quite a lot within Haleon, and we're always driving for higher effectiveness of each media channel. And we're doing that through, changing target audience or focusing on more quality metrics, being present on better channels, which are viewed by a certain target audience, target group, increasing our flighting duration, our weekly intensity, looking at competition as well. Let's not forget that, because MMM also gives you a glimpse into comparative activities if you have the data, of course. But there are a lot of insights that we've used. Like, for example, we have a lot of seasonal brands, so like cold and flu brands, and the MMM has allowed us to evaluate whether we're investing the right amount during the months. So are we over-investing or under-investing when it comes to, the cold and flu season starts and when it ends? So that's something, that has been really helpful for some of our brands. But also, some places we realize that we're overspending on TV for certain brands. So it's more about, how can we optimize that spending and bring it down and increase our effectiveness on TV. We have a lot of quality projects going on, of course, TV quality projects. And, we've got insights in terms of, how those quality measures have been performing. And they have been performing, and, we're cascading that to the other brands as well. Though I think recently, I think what the MMM has allowed us to do, and working with on supplier as well, is that we're able to do meta-analysis as well. And in simple words, it's basically bringing all those learnings together and identifying the common learnings across the different media channels for a particular brand. So if I take Sensodyne as an example, we've identified what's working on TV, what's working on social, and kind of making sure that those fundamentals, right, are implemented for Sensodyne, but then also using those learnings to cascade to other smaller oral health brands as well. So I guess these are some of just examples, of how we've been using the insights, but we're very big on actioning those MMM outputs. There's no need of, there's no point of doing it and then, allowing dust to, gather on the MMM files.
No, of course, because that's the thing. You have so much data now that you could like find so many like details and granularity that I think it's probably part of your job is then like finding what are the big conclusions and then how do you make those happen in the business later? Because you come from global, you have to implement both global and locally, right? How do you make that? How do you get that next step to happen?
Yeah, it's a struggle, Daniel. It's a challenge, but I do love challenges. So you're right. I think the sometimes global guys are seen as the bad guys
Yes.
in organizations. But we work together, so it's all about collaboration. So I think we've set up a process in a way where I work with the local teams very closely. So we have, just before the main results delivery, I would have a workshop with them to review the initial insights and numbers, and then use their expertise to shape the recommendations. So in that, it's usually the modeling agency, me, and the local team, and we kind of shape their recommendations. So kind of getting their buy-in and getting a sense of what would work for them, what doesn't work for them. And then we also make sure that the local teams are including, embedding of the MMM in their annual objectives as well. I wouldn't say that MMM is the source of truth for everything. I think how we use it as an additional voice on the table, because it's a mathematical model. The mathematical model doesn't sometimes know the reality of the market and how things are changing, right? It all depends on data. So it's an additional voice on the table, but we make sure that additional voice is a mandatory part of your brand planning each year. And then what I do from a global perspective, we have a tracker whereby we have visibility of what recommendations have been actioned by our media agency. So I work with the media agency and they populate that on a quarterly basis. So it's a bit of a lot of collaboration, a lot of back and forth, but I think it's really necessary for the global people to be involved with the local teams and not leave it to them. Because part of my role is also upskilling those teams as well in analytics and MMM. Making
like
sure
kind of be an evangelist internally of like the qualities of using data for decision making and so on. No.
Exactly. So giving them examples, how we've used it in other countries, how you can drive benefit for MMM, but also making sure they understand the MMM as well, right? Understand some of the KPIs, your ROIs, your effectiveness measures. But buy-in from the local team is very, very critical. Like we've had instances where, we've started a project and the buy-in from the local teams has been very difficult because they've been questioning methodology, questioning everything. So it's a slowing process, but once you get the buy-in, then the process becomes much easier.
Yeah, it's probably kind of a flywheel, no? When you have like success stories in different markets, the influence of MMM, it's probably easier to then deploy in other markets, no? Because you have that success story, if you like.
Sure, exactly. And I think we have a marketing festival every year, and now we get our CMO to talk about MMM success stories as well. So it's really, I think it's really picked up pace, but we make sure that we're visible everywhere.
Exactly. You have to, right? And how do you see like marketing or media mix modeling evolving as such as like a best practice or methodology within progressive FMCG companies?
It's a good question. Um, in my view, I think, and from what I read and hear, is that effectiveness is becoming top of the agenda for a lot of the FMCG companies. But also there's a need for, within the media effectiveness part and marketing effectiveness, there's a need for a department with one voice, one source of truth. But also, considering that there's budget pressures, we need economies of scale. We need standard methodologies and standard guidelines and synergies. So I think that the MMM is here to stay, fortunately. And depending on where it's placed, whether it's in marketing or within insights analytics or media, that's a separate debate. And I think that's for each company to decide on what works for them. But it's definitely here to stay as we said, the media landscape's evolving very fast. We need insight to that. We need to make sure we're driving more pounds or dollars out of our marketing activity. So we definitely need to evaluate that somehow. We can't do that through simple Excel correlation analysis. But I think for the function to involve, there needs to be willingness to kind of use MMM, and that needs to come from senior management or senior stakeholders. They need to be willing to kind of buy in the MMM, but also make sure that it's cascaded across organization in terms of using it, but also using it to rectify course of action. So that's really, really important for the function to evolve, in my view.
And I have another question, by the way. Like, since we're talking about data, taking conclusions out and recommendations, is there a case of the usage of AI in MMM?
Their AI is being used in MMM, but not at Haleon at the moment, just because we're still starting that journey and we don't want to rush into it. So at the moment, I think without AI, it's working really well.
Well, there you go.
It's working really well. But of course, these the methodology that's used to come up with the MMM, it's all machine based and it learns over time.
Yeah.
So from a modeling perspective, I think the AI is built. But in terms of helping us to implement actions, we haven't implemented AI in that space yet.
Got it. And as I said before, I anticipated it that I would ask you for career advice. So we talked about like your career, which has been very interesting with great brands, BAT, Reckitt, going into consulting, now at Haleon. If you went back to the beginning of your career with everything that you've learned, what's that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Yeah, this is something I really, really had to think about because, looking back at my career, and this is maybe on the softer skill part of things, not professional, but I think for me, a big advice is don't get sucked into the negativity or gossip at work. And this is something which I reflect back on, and I've seen people, and there's a lot of talk about mental health these days, which is really relevant because I think that throws you off in various ways. You might have may have not worked with a person, but basically due to others' gossip or negativity, you have a bias towards that person, which isn't the best thing. It impacts your own performance. It impacts the view you have of the company, but also the career as well. And it might, it creates room for unnecessary thoughts. So I think, we're all victim to this early in our career, mid-career. Maybe it gets better mid-career and towards, when you get more senior. But as you start your career, I think the negativity really can get a hold of you. So I would say be mindful of that, be aware of it, and let that not get you in.
Great advice. And I think also great advice for people that are like starting in their careers and people that are leading teams and have an organization under them to really like foster that transparency and avoid the gossip, right? So this was great advice. So Ammar, I'm gonna try to give a bit of a download of all the great notes I've taken from this conversation. So first of all, in your career, and we reflected on that a little bit, I think that very good move to go into consulting and leave corporate, because you do very different work. And then, as you said, like you're more comfortable with taking risk, which I think is a learning for a lifetime, really. Yeah, I really liked how you brought down to like a very understandable level what marketing or media mix modeling means. Like that, yeah, that you really analyze like the impact on sales, share of market, brand equity, and yeah, you can really like have that granularity to see like how your media spend or how your marketing spend is actually impacting, is actually impacting your business. And you're doing now like with this big program within Haleon, which is covering 50% of the marketing spend. And I think that it looks like it's being very useful internally, and it's really helping like in an FMCG world where there's a lot of scrutiny on budgets, like to bring that like scientific data-based approach. I'm sure it's really helpful when taking decision because yeah, media is changing rapidly. Each generation uses media differently, and having that numbers approach and not gut feeling, I'm sure helps. What else? Yeah, about TV. Interesting that it's still like the king, even if we think that everybody's just using their computer, or not even like the computer. That sounded like a very boomer thing to say, more like the mobile phones than the computer. And yeah, I also thought it was interesting when analyzing seasonal brands, like the impact that the media spend has on that. And yeah, finally, also the classic challenge with deploying global initiatives locally, and it's a bit about like creating that relationship, that empathy with the local teams, which later really helps like deliver the program in a more tailored way, probably. So these were the main conclusions. Ammar, really like this conversation. I think it's one of these that everybody should listen to just to learn about the concept of MMM. So thanks so much for joining.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I mean, the world of marketing effectiveness is huge. And there's so many things, we could talk about and learn from others as well. So I guess, I'm glad that the marketing world is reawakening to the marketing effectiveness side of things, because I think the MMM kind of got forgotten about in the last couple of years, but it's having a revival, which is great.
Interesting. Well, we'll stay close to that. And my feeling is that won't be the last episode that we talk about that. So thanks, Ammar, again. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great day.